Welcome to On The Prowl, Florida Panthers 2025-2026 season preview, episode 37, with very special guest David Dwork, who writes for the Florida Panthers for the Hockey News. David, welcome. Glad to see you.
No, thank you for inviting me on.
Well, it was a fantastic season last year. It was great. I actually got to go to Game 6 to see them win the cup. That was I've never seen that in person before, so that was a real thrill for me. And I know your incredible writing was just absolutely fantastic last year during the season. And just want to start off with that. And again, I encourage people to read David out there on the Hockey News because he writes some excellent articles and he does it with a lot of passion and knowledge. So wanted to start off with that. As we were talking right before we got on air, I was planning on doing this podcast to talk about how we're going to, how the Panthers going to handle the absence of Matthew Tkachuk till probably December or January. And then, of course, Nosek is out for a little bit too. And then the very unfortunate events occurred where Sasha Barkov injured his knee and had to have surgery, and he's out 7 to 9 months. So wanted to first talk about that a little bit because I know I want to talk about that. Then I want to talk about some possible line combinations and what Maurice and Zito might think here. The first thing is this, okay? Now, there is long-term injured reserve and season-ending long-term injured reserve. And as you know, with the long-term injured reserve, it's a lower salary cap amount that they get versus season-ending long-term injured reserve. And I did get to see the video, Bill Zito's press conference from the other day, and he's really up in the air. Is that the kind of sense that you got from that as well, David?
Yeah, and really, it doesn't surprise me with this front office. And when Billy spoke the other day, it was the day after the surgery, I think it was, and everything was still processing. And look, they're not going to have any idea in terms of whether Sasha Barkov can make a contribution. Let's just say, it's best case scenario and everything goes perfectly right, and he can play, around playoff time, give or take. And this is just me spitballing, but if they're giving it a 7 to 9 month, guesstimate as of now, they're not going to know until he's going to have to start skating, which that's not going to happen for at least probably like maybe 4 months, 3-4 months, or maybe a little bit more. I'm trying to remember what it was when I had surgery like a couple of years ago on my ACL, and I think I was skating like 4 or 5 months after that. And I'm just some schmuck that's going to PT 3 times a week, whereas this is his job. So they're going to be doing everything that they can to keep him healthy, to keep it as it should be as he goes through this process. But they're not going to have any idea whether he's going to be able to contribute this season or not for months from now, is the point that I was trying to make. So,
right.
So Bill Zito, he's going to have several options on the table that they're going to have to let play out until we get, past the new year, when, he gets to the point where in his recovery, where not only can he get on the ice, but he can get out there and start pushing off, where he can start really trying to test his knee. And I would be shocked if they pushed any kind of limit on that, because this is a team, as we've seen over the last several years, particularly thinking back to last season, they value rest and recovery extremely high, maybe more so than most other organizations out there. They were one of the first teams at the forefront of the recovery process, and they take it very seriously, to where they've changed the whole way that they travel. Their players, it's ingrained in them from very early in camp to go through a certain process to discover what their process is everybody is going to react and recover differently. And that's something that I going back, I think it was Sam Reinhart that gave some insight into that last year during the playoff run, just in how each guy is given the opportunity to kind of do what they need for their body, and everybody's been entrusted to do that. So, long-winded answer with Sasha Barkov and Bill Zito, but yeah, it doesn't surprise me that he'd be saying that kind of thing. And really, we're just at the beginning of this. Short-term solutions, sure. I'm sure that they're already working on whatever they might do just to add to that depth on their roster. But as hard as it might be, they're going to have to play the long game on this one and just see how it develops with Sasha.
Yeah, I agree. And, and a lot of people, and go back to last season, remember, early on, Barkov got hurt and we were without him for a while at the early part of last season, so, and I'm trying to remind people, you need to remember that. Now, one of the things, and I know how you're going to answer this, is because I've seen a lot of stuff being bandied about, One of the names that was thrown out there was Evgeny Malkin. Okay. And I said, and I'm like, well, he has a home in Miami. And, he looked and I said, you know what? Okay. I can tell you this because I know Bill Zito. All right. After following him with the Panthers, he's not going to make a move like that because number one, it's going to cost too much. They're going to have to give up too much to get something in return for Malkin. Now, Malkin is well past his prime. I can tell you that right now. And he is somebody, I think he scored 15 goals for the Penguins last year. So it's marginal production at best for something like that. And what I personally think is going to happen is I think we're going to look for in-house solutions for things like this. What's your take on that?
I agree with you that Zito is not going to take any big swings unless they make perfect sense. Like if they target a guy and they say, this is somebody who we feel if they bring them in will fit and excel in our systems, a la like a Seth Jones, somebody who they had their eye on that they felt would be very good and they were willing to pay a certain price for it. But just to bring in a big name or a flashy thing, just because maybe it'll make us feel a little bit better. That's far from any kind of thing that this front office would do. It maybe past incarnations would have those kind of knee-jerk reactions and such, but Bill Zito and his guys, definitely not. They also understand that, well, it is extremely frustrating and unlucky and whatever moniker you want to put on it for what has happened to Sasha Barkov and how it's going to impact this Panther season. They weren't all in on 2025, 26 as the end all be all for this franchise and for what they're trying to do. As we've been talking about, they've built this roster to last, to compete for the Stanley Cup for years to come. And they're in a position to do that. So while, it stinks that Barkov is out and they're going to have to figure out a way to win without him. And I think that they will. Will they win as much? Probably not. It'd be very difficult. But I just don't see any kind of a knee-jerk reaction to bring in somebody, particularly that would cost you a fair amount on the asset side, whether it's current NHL guys or futures, and they don't really have much in the futures department. So I do agree that they would ideally like to solve it in-house. That would be both convenient and inexpensive. But either way, I think it'll be somewhere between that and a more sensible targeted move that may take a little time. Over anything that just, in terms of every move that the Panthers have made really over the last several years just wouldn't make sense.
Yeah, I agree. And I'm going to say this, and, the Panthers re-signing Brad Marchand now is just unbelievably huge after this because, he has that veteran experience. He was the captain of the Bruins for years. He's a great leader in the locker room. And I think having him in there is going to be invaluable for everybody on the team. I really do.
Yeah, I think the veteran element of that locker room will probably be leaned on a little bit more. You lose your captain, which is obviously, stinks no matter what team you're on. In the Panthers case, Sasha is such a lead by example guy. He's not like the rah vocal guy in the locker room. He's more of the quiet joke and, everybody loves Sasha, but everybody has their role. I think in terms of somebody to lift up the room, to set an example to lead by, I think Brad Marchand's a great guy to point to just because this is a guy who's giving maximum effort no matter where he is, whether it's practice, game, skating with his family. Like he's always giving his all. He puts his heart into everything he does. So he'll be a great addition to the locker room to help them kind of work through being without such a key player, but so will a Sam Reinhart. Another guy that's just going to have to, lead by example. And he's been following in Sasha Barkov's footsteps a lot over the last few years. So perhaps this will be a chance for Sam Reinhart to step out onto his own and say, hey, look, now I'm the guy. And I'm the best defensive forward in the NHL. Look at me. But they've got a lot of those guys that they can look to, even like the not so flashy guys, but that are big roles in the room. Like, Evan Rodriguez comes to mind as just somebody who is a vocal guy. That's not necessarily like, top six or whatever. But that's just the beauty of this room that Bill Zito and his guys have put together, because everybody in that room is like a good natured, good IQ or good person, as opposed to like the egos and the flashy, flashy egos and all that, as I'm struggling to come up with the correct words here. But no, they've just built such a good room with the camaraderie and the leadership and everything that if any team is capable and equipped to handle something like this, it would be the Panthers.
Yeah, I agree. And, they've already started talking about possible line combinations, and I did get to see some of them. And like the first line, they had Bennett, Verhage, Reinhart. Second line, Marchand, Lundell, Losterinen. Third line, Boquist, Rodriguez, and Mackey. And fourth line, Greer, Kunin, and Noah Gregor, or some other kind of backup right there. I mean, and first of all, obviously, the Marchand line it's a proven commodity. I mean, that was very obvious during the playoffs and how valuable that was, and what great chemistry that they had. But I mean, it's going to be, and I know if I were to ask Maurice this question, he's going to say it's going to be a very fluid type of situation. What are your thoughts on line combinations and how things will work out?
I think we've seen from Paul Maurice over the last several years that he likes to play with the lines during the regular season a little bit, just so he can have an idea of who works a little bit better with who feeds off who better. And then when the playoff comes, we don't see the line changes as much. Like that's when he locks it in. But being without Barkov, I think it gives a great opportunity for you to see Anton Lundell as somebody who could step up and get a bit more minutes. He's probably going to go from 15-ish minutes a game to 20-ish minutes a game. It gives other opportunities on special teams as well. I do like that they're keeping that Lundell, Lusterine, and Marchand line together just because it was so good, so dynamic, so dominant during the playoffs that you want to at least give them a run and see if that's something that's going to stretch out over a larger period of time. It does not surprise me at all as well to see familiar faces all together with Bennett Verhage and Sam Reinhart. Obviously they've all played together in some capacity before. So you want to stick with what you know, but it gives an opportunity because Mackie Samoskevich is an interesting person on this roster just because several players have already spoken about how he looks even better so far in camp than he did last season. Like he looks faster, he looks stronger. He already had these amazing offensive capabilities. So he's just somebody that, they have him on a, quote unquote third line role right now with Boquist and Rodriguez, but they've got such interchangeable players. We've seen Rodriguez shine and thrive in a top six role. We've seen Boquist, in smaller doses. He'll step in and score a big goal here and there. So the Panthers are very blessed to have that opportunity, to give that opportunity, for those guys, and to have guys who not only have shown in other places, other teams or whatever, that they can step up into those spots, but they've shown with this Panthers club that they can do it.
We've been talking about the forwards here a little bit, but the defensive core, it's pretty intact. Now, what did you think of them picking up Petrie from the Red Wings? I thought that was a pretty good pickup. He seems to have some good veteran leadership. Seems to be pretty solid. What are your thoughts about him?
Yeah, if it's somebody who Zito and his guys target and say this is a guy that's going to fit in our defensive systems, then I'm immediately prone to say, yep, that's going to work. Now, seeing him in practice, he seems like he skates well. He moves the puck quickly. It's hard to gauge in a practice setting, particularly when it comes to the Panther systems, is because they're so intent on a 5-man game going up against an opponent. He's said a lot of the right things just in terms of he knows what's expected of a player in these systems. He knows you have to put in the work and the results will be there. He's spoken about how great of a room it is and how it's nice to join and how they make you feel welcomed right away. So far, all the boxes are being checked. I'm going to be keeping an eye on him once we get into the regular season and you start seeing the best from the opponents. And that's when you're really going to be able to tell. But to this point, I'm excited to see what he can bring. And it's good that the Panthers are going to be able to once again, knocking on wood, be 7 deep and completely comfortable with any of the 7 that you have on any given night. Obviously giving a nod there to Uwe Smolenskis. But if Petrie can jump in and fit in and give you a tough decision to make on that 5, 6, 7 spot, all the better. And again, another check for Zito.
I agree 100%. And I think one of the things I think the Panthers are going to be real dependent upon this season is Seth Jones. I think it was a sigh of relief for him when he went from, he had the weight of the world on his shoulders when he was with the Blackhawks. And now he got to the Panthers. And then, unfortunately, he was thrust into that situation when Ekblad was suspended. And, he had to eat a lot of minutes. And he really stepped up to the plate because he wasn't expecting to have to do that, but he did that. And I think I think Maurice and the coaching staff is going to expect the same kind of level from him this year because, it's that, and I know Maurice hates to use that word next man up kind of thing, but, it's everybody. It's not just the forwards, the defensive core is going to have to step up. And I think Seth Jones is going to have to do the same.
Yeah, he's definitely equipped to handle it too. Like, and you talked about how his minutes shot up more than probably anybody expected or wanted it to be when he first got here last season. But that worked to his advantage because he said once the playoffs got here, something switched for him, and it went from like not necessarily trying to keep up is not the right term, but trying to learn on the fly, and he was able to kind of switch to muscle memory once the playoffs rolled around and just trust his instincts a little more that they were going to work in the systems. Now he's at an off season where he's been able to digest all of that off ice knowledge that he didn't have a chance just because he started the season with the Panthers at the trade deadline. So now he's able to go into camp feeling prepared, feeling like he's seen what they're throwing at him before. He knows where to be. He's not learning as much as he's trying to advance and get better. So for sure, like I'm curious to see how they're going to play him are they going to put him on special teams a little bit more? I would expect him to be once again with Nico Mikkola just because they were a good combination when they were together, and you've got so much chemistry already with Ekblad and Forsling that you're probably going to leave that as it is for a bit. But yeah, Florida is they're very lucky, man. They've gotten some really, really solid defense. I don't want to say they're really lucky because they've chosen these guys, they've signed them, they've targeted them, but it's the envy of many teams, I'm sure, when you look at Florida's blue line, you're like, wow, they are really solid and stacked from top to bottom.
Obviously, I think we have, to me personally, because I'm a big fan of his, is, Bob, I think we have the best goalie in the NHL. I just, he always seems to rise to another level, especially when we get to the playoffs. And, he makes some just saves that are just astronomical. And because I know you've seen him time and time again here, and there's really kind of no question in my mind, he's real money when it comes to the playoffs and we start to get going. And, he really uses the regular season to get warmed up. How do you see, the backup for the Panthers here, Tarasov? I mean, he looked good in the one exhibition game, but again, that's just an exhibition game. What are your thoughts about that? Did the Panthers take a step up in terms of getting a better backup goalie this year?
I think they think so. I know that Zito and his guys were very high on Tarasov. Zito liked him a lot when they were together in Columbus years ago, when he first came into the NHL or first came into the pro part and was part of Columbus's systems. But look, everything from what you guys saw in the exhibition game and what we've seen in practice, he looks pretty legit to this point. Again, it's very small sample size, but what I will take into account between what we've seen in the eye test and the fact that this is a guy that the goalie guild, the goalie excellence department targeted, they have not missed yet. I mean, even, like last year, bringing in Vitek Vanacek, who was extremely solid behind Bob when he needed to be called upon. Bob himself, I mean, the way that he's been able to turn his game around, be able to manage his minutes, to trusting Robbie Tallis and his staff, it all goes hand in hand. So I'm very excited kind of to see what Tarasov can bring just based off the excitement level, what they were when they brought him in, what we've seen so far, just his eagerness to work with Bob. And he just seems like a very genuinely nice guy, which again, fits right in with the rest of this club. But yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? When you were talking about Bob and just how good he's been in the playoffs, it just brought me back to that first playoff series against the Washington Capitals. What I guess was 2022 was that first year when I remember leaving that series. They won in 6 games, thinking that it didn't feel like they dominated that series. It felt like Sergei Bobrovsky played better than I'd seen him play in a Panthers uniform consistently over the course of that 6 games. And even in the 4 games after, when they got swept by Tampa, I thought Bob was not an issue there at all. So we were just kind of getting a glimpse in that 10-game playoff run that they did of playoff Bob and what was to come, because the next 3 years after that, final, and Bob has just been lights out every postseason. Going from is it a myth? It's very much a real thing. This is Bob, Stanley Cup champion, Hall of Fame, gonna be. So it's been really cool the way that his kind of path and his story has ascended over the last several years.
It really has. And, and one of the other things I kind of want to touch on tonight is, of course, Matthew Tkachuk, and it just seems, just everything he's been kind of put to the side because of what happened with Sasha Barkov, and naturally, but he did have that surgery. And reading about that, it does take about 4 to 5 months to be able to start. And it said, especially if you're athletic and you play sports, with that type of surgery, because it's very, very delicate, it's very different. But obviously, if they can get him back, say, in a January kind of a time frame, I think that's going to be a real moral boost for the team. And I think it's gonna pump everybody up, because knowing him, he's gonna be dedicated and diligent to want to get back as sooner rather than later.
Yeah, that would definitely be a boost whenever that day does come, January, February, whatever. I know that they're talking about after the new year, that there's the speculation of the hope is that he wants to be back to as close to 100% as possible for the Olympics over in Italy, which is going to be in mid to late February. And I can't say that without mentioning, the tipping your cap and a little sadness to Sasha Barkov, who won't be there.
Yeah.
I know how important that would have been to him and to his whole country of Finland. So that really sucks for him. But yeah, regarding Matthew Tkachuk, it will be, and just to hear, I hadn't even thought about just that element of it, of how much of a boost that will be to the team, because they're going to be battling to that point, and they're going to be battling no matter what, because that's this team's persona. But the points won't be as easy to come by, because you can't take a Sasha Barkov out of the lineup and just roll just as easily. Matthew Tkachuk being the guy that he is, and just thinking back to last year's playoffs, I think in that Tampa series, he had like 4 points in the first 2 games or something like that, like multi-point games, and really just doing what Matthew Tkachuk does, which is picking up a lot of attention, picking up a lot of coverage, and still finding a way to pick up a lot of points. So he's going to be very dedicated to getting back. I'm quite sure of that. And it'll be fun to see just how much of a boost he gives the team, both on the ice and off the ice, in terms of like an emotional lift when he does come back.
Yeah, I agree 100%. And, it goes without saying that Maurice and the coaching staff is really going to have their work cut out for them. But I really harken back to one of the things, I know he said it and not in so many words, is, he looks at the regular season like a marathon and not a sprint. Because, a lot of people get, they've lost 4 or 5 in a row. Look, it's been horrible. We're out of this spot or whatever. And, and you know what? That's not his time. That's not his frame of mind. That's not how he looks at it. It's so, so different, because, as a fan, you look at it like you want the Panthers to finish top out, but you know what? It's not necessarily the best thing that the Panthers finish top out. It's going to be a real challenge. There's no questions asked for Paul and his staff this year. And, I think that's one of the other things, somebody, another Panther fan and I were talking the other day, and I said, you know what, to have it happen now versus say 2 or 3 months into the season, I think it's better that it happened now, because they can start off with a game plan going ahead instead of 2 or 3 months in the season. And then it's like, it puts brakes to everything, and they have to kind of retool things. What are your thoughts about that?
Yeah, totally. Like you never want this to happen, obviously. Like I gotta put that caveat out there. But yeah, if it's gonna happen, you want it to happen as early as possible, because as you said, it's before the season. So you have a chance to regroup mentally, regroup with your guys, develop a plan that you can see play out over the next several months. Whereas if you're already fighting your battles, if you're already in the middle of a season and suddenly this massive curveball gets thrown your way, it can really derail things. And to see the Panthers, just knowing their history, and you talked about it before, Barkov missed time last year. Obviously, Tkachuk missed a lot of time. Sam Reinhart's missed time over the last couple of years. They've seen a lot of players who have been in and out of the lineup. Sam Bennett has missed time. We've seen how that ripple effect impacts the team. Aaron Ekblad being out has a significant impact on the way this team defends. And yet they found ways to continue to build points and to continue to find success and to prepare for their ultimate goal, which is succeeding during the playoffs. I think if you have to ever deal with a situation like this Sasha Barkov injury, that you are 100% correct. Much better now in late September than in late November or at any point after that, both for the timeline point purposes and for just being able to kind of collect yourself and go into the season with the mindset, not just the plan for how you can figure out, roster wise, how you're going to make it work from a front office standpoint, but the players can kind of have a mindset squared away. Okay, we're going into this a little bit more of an underdog than we thought we were going to be. We're going into this a little bit more behind the 8 ball than we would have anticipated. That's a mindset that they had a lot of last season until the trade deadline rolled around and they added Marchand and Zito. They were kind of viewing themselves as, all right, we're going to have to do this as a little bit of an underdog, a little bit of a fight back. And they were embracing it and they were doing just fine with that. So I don't think it's that foreign on these guys. And I think they'll I'm sure that they will look to embrace the challenge and say, look, we've conquered all these other incredibly difficult things that have come up over the last several years. So bring it on.
Yeah, I agree, David. One of the things, and we're going to kind of wrap things up here. And one of the things that I think is really going to be positive for them is, when outsiders have come in, say like when Marchand has come in and when Jones has come in, one of the things that they said is right away is that the locker room, it's so different in there than other teams. And, it's not about, it's not about me, it's about the team. And I think that's one of the things I think is going to do very well for them this year is, even though I know coach has said, it's not next man up, but I think they're going to have that attitude. I think everybody is going to take a step up. I think they're going to really be very diligent about that. I think you're going to see some great efforts. And, one of the things, and I know we talked about this a little bit earlier, and I just kind of want to close a little bit with this, is I think Mackie Samoskevich is a real X factor for them. I think he's ready. And like you said, he looks much better prepared. Everything everybody said right now, he really looks like he's ready to go. And I think the Panthers are really going to be dependent upon him to do well. And I think he'll respond in kind. And I think instead of seeing him sit in the playoffs this year, Lord willing, we get to the playoffs, I think he'll be there. I think he'll be an integral part of their success this year.
Yeah, no, I think that's something that they're going to be. I don't want to say they're expecting it because you never want to put that kind of a weight on, but I think that that's kind of the thought based off of the way that his game grew and ascended last year. I think it was 15 goals that he scored, which it's a big number for somebody who wasn't even old enough to drink for most of the season, playing, in his second full pro season. So I think that ideally they would see him as getting himself into a top 6 role at some point this year. But just kind of to your first point, there's so many guys that are still very young and capable of stepping into a bigger role. Like Eetu Luostarinen, 27. Jesper Boquist, I think he's just 26. Lundell, I think he's 23, entering his 5th pro season, which is like crazy to think because he's still so young. All these guys are very much, they've all shown that they can take that next step and that a breakout from any of them would not be terribly surprising. They're all going to be getting some run and some considerable playing time this season. And they all have an opportunity to step up and to show that they can be that guy who takes that step. That's what we're going to be watching for. But they know that they've got the character to do it. They've got the teammates and the people surrounded them to do it. This Panthers, even without Barkov and even without Tkachuk, there's still plenty of talent in that forward grouping. So yes, you're absolutely right that there's plenty of guys that are young and capable of taking the next step. And I'm sure they're viewing this as, hey, this is my chance. This is my time to be that guy. Let me go do that. So we're going to see who's going to be able to actually turn that into fruition.
I really do. And, we're now about 9 days from the start of the season. And, it's starting to get real for a lot of people right now, which is fantastic. And, one of the things I want to thank you, David, for taking time out to talk to us about, what we can look forward to this upcoming season. Make sure you follow David out on X, Twitter, also on the Hockey News. He does excellent in terms of his writing. You do need to read him every day. He's part of my daily routine of everybody that I read, and all the Panther writers are fantastic, and I read them all. And I think it really gives you a great perspective on things. But David, we thank you. Hang on a second here. I want to thank everybody for tuning in for this podcast. And as always, it's a great day for Florida Panthers hockey. Time to hunt.